And welcome to Let 'em Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo. I've got another great show in store for you. We're going to talk about our continuing investigation of the New York City opera scene. And I don't know, folks out there really into opera. I hope so. I mean, New York is a cultural, it's polymorphous culturally, right? And if you're going to know anything, you should know one of the oldest and one of the most noble of all the artistic genres is opera. It's been going on, I don't know, we're going to find out, a long, long time. And it's come into the 21st century, which is really cool because I like to see a traditional art form consistently updated and refreshed for the new audiences. That's really great. And there's going to even be the Untamed Opera Festival, so we'll be talking all about that. So our show is opera, and our guests are Chris Fecteau, welcome Chris, and Karen Rich, and they are the artistic director and general manager of the Arte Opera Ensemble, which is, let's see, I was going to show it. And that's going to be from August 12th to 17th, and it's going to be at La Mama, 66 East 4th Street in the East Village. I still call it the Lower East Side. And welcome to the show. It's so great to have you.
Thank you.
We're glad to be here.
Yeah, great. And maybe we'll begin by telling me a little bit about what the Arte Opera Ensemble is, how long it's been around, and what its purpose is. And whoever wants to jump right in. Either of you can jump right in anytime you feel like.
Our first productions were way back in 2000, and we created the company to give young singers experience in repertoire that they hadn't done before. It's all about debut roles and to give people a chance also to work their craft. Mm-hmm. 20 years ago, there weren't too many small companies in New York. There were a few, but not many who were able to give people at the bottom rung of the ladder a chance to get started. So that's kind of why we began doing things.
I remember for years I used to walk by on the Bowery when I live in that area.
Amato.
The Amato, I used to say Amato Opera, and I've been living here a long time, so I used to walk down when it was a pretty rough neighborhood. Still, not so much anymore.
67 years, I think Tony had that company.
Wow.
I worked for him for 3 and learned a ton from Tony.
Really? So,
Great man.
What was the history there? How did an opera wind up? How did opera wind up on the Bowery?
I think Tony, when he came, was working with a lot of people that were coming back from World War II. And doing classes for singers.
Yeah, it was like opera therapy when he started. And his wife was a singer. Sally Amato was a singer.
I see.
And when he founded the company, I think originally they were on the West Side in a small space. And
then they moved a couple of spaces. They were
he petitioned
on
the city, and he got that building for $1.
Oh, great.
That's why they were on the Bowery, was because that's where he could get a building for $1.
I remember. I wish I got one or two in those days. All right, great. Yeah. So, that's another opera company. It's funny. I used to walk by there all the time and wondered what the history was. So what is the Arte Opera Ensemble? When did that start? 2000, I saw?
2000 were the first productions that we did. This festival is the 15th year of our festival. Mm-hmm. Things sort of concentrated into a festival. Partly out of convenience. It's sometimes helpful to just concentrate things into a short period of time. Mm-hmm. You can rent the venue for a while, for a shorter period of time, and concentrate your other resources for a short amount of time.
I see. And what was your background in opera? How did you wind up working in opera?
I kind of grew up as a pianist who loved to work with singers, mm-hmm. And at Carnegie Mellon I started working in the opera workshop there, and then at Florida State, I was in the conducting program, but again, was in the opera department a lot and learned a lot from.
I see, right. For people who are saying, people with that beautiful trained voice. Right. And in the popular culture, especially old black and white movies, it's like the large woman sings, right? Right? Everybody knows that aspect of opera.
The largest lady gets the largest role.
Right, exactly, right. And so that's always been, that's an ancient almost idiom in the English language. But, obviously people are, and when you talk about, my family, opera was a huge part of my upbringing, believe it or not. Even though I'm not a huge opera fan, everybody else in my family sure was. And I went with them many times to see different performances. Always the second ones, never the first ones. They never would give me a free ticket for that one. They all went to those ones.
Well, if you want to come to our opening nights, you can definitely come.
Thank you. People really loved opera. They love it. When they love it, they really love it. Right. It's almost a fanaticism, isn't it?
Well, that's part of the part of the origins of the company too. We're trying to build enthusiasm for the art form, kind of at its highest level and in its purest form, because there are a lot of companies who are having a wonderful time exploring ways that you can do opera in bars and do opera that's hip and do opera where people drink beer. And it's wonderful to be having that much fun with it. Mm-hmm. But we sort of try to keep our focus on keeping the singers grounded in the tradition of where the pieces came from. Mm-hmm. So that even if we do an updated version, we've worked with them on the poetic form. We've worked with them on excavating all of the meaning that's available in the language and all of the musical signals for how they can interpret things, and that way when they go out into the wider world and do these fun updated productions, they're standing on a firm foundation of the origins of the craft.
Excellent. I want to ask you more about that, but let's actually go back to talking about the opera, the Untamed Opera Festival. When is that happening? What's going to happen at it?
August 12 to 27 is a summer share at La Mama. We have two main stage operas, La Kalisto, written in 1651, sung in Italian, takes two Greek myths and sort of mashes them together in a fun way. Lots of fun. It's got gods and humans and goat people.
Great, my favorite opera.
Gods, humans, and
gods
goats.
and people come into the earth and everything.
And we'll have a period ensemble with authentic period instruments accompanying that, which is really special.
Wow.
And on the other end of the spectrum, the other main stage opera is The Cunning Little Vixen, to be sung in Czech. Okay. That's from 1924, 1925, so much more recent, but still almost 100 years old.
Sure.
It's the first time we've done anything in Czech, so that'll be fun.
So it could be in any language.
Absolutely.
Opera. Is there any culture where an opera has never been performed?
I don't know. I'm sure there are many, but certainly Western musical tradition has drawn on it a lot, and Eastern musical tradition even more so now.
What makes it an opera? What makes it? It's not just somebody singing.
That's a pretty broad question. Some people say that it should be sung from beginning to end, but then you think about things that are considered operetta. There might be some dialogue in between.
I see. That's a different. I didn't know. I always wondered what an operetta was. That you just answered that question for anybody out there. It's interesting, right? So an operetta has some dialogue, but an opera would be sung from beginning to end, all the way through.
Right. So besides the two main stage operas, there's also a scenes program that plays twice in the rotation. That's with some of the people playing the secondary roles in the two main stage pieces. They get a chance to play leading roles. And then the fourth program is a recital called Wild Things, and it's some animal songs and other sort of crazy things that don't fit in with opera, but more song.
Right. Very good. Excellent. So, okay, good. Well, we have an example of some of that work, and I have a lot more questions about the history of opera and Tommy the opera, right? And what is the difference between them and how are they related? Let's see something we're going to look at right now, a little clip.
We hope.
I think this is a psychedelic clip. Wait a second.
Ooh.
Some ghosts.
Yeah, that sounds like we're having a technical difficulty. So, there it goes.
There we go.
All right, that's an example right there. That was sort of cool. And are we back? Yeah, here we are. Great. And so that was pretty cool. All right, so tell us a little bit. What did we just see?
That's from last season's production of Manon. Obviously sung in French. opening scene as travelers arrive at an inn.
And we meet some courtesans who are stirring up trouble already and demanding things that they think they should have and causing a fuss.
I see. So there's always, when they say like a melodramatic or a soap opera or something like that, the implication is that opera is always sort of, the emotions are sort of almost overblown. Like it ends, it's not enough to break up with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, you have to like murder them.
Well,
Well, it makes a lot of sense in the, from the origin of the genre, because when opera was being created, it was sort of a collaborative effort to get a heightened sense of drama up to the level where someone absolutely has to sing their thoughts and sing what they have to say. I mean, you really have to be in a very dramatically elevated state, to feel the need to do that and have it be believable that that's how someone's expressing themselves.
How old is opera? I mean, what we consider opera, I mean, it might have antecedents going back
around
thousands
1600. The Kalisto that we're doing is only about 50 years into the real history of opera, and it. But the fun thing about some of those early pieces is that the foundations that were laid in how opera was created exist through to the operas that are being created today. You still have a libretto, which is the script and the words, and there's most of the time a poetic form to those. And then the composers find a way to set them that tells the story as well.
What were the original stories? Did it change over time, the type of stories that opera told, or did it tell basically the same story?
I think every period has had sort of different kinds of concentrations. The earliest ones were often mythological, and when you get to for instance, like Traviata, which we did last year, it made a fuss because it was a modern story of modern courtisans.
Was President Trump in it?
No, but there were people in the audience of Traviata for the first performance that knew the woman who was portrayed and had only died 2 or 3 years before.
I see. It's interesting.
So very modern, and it made kind of a fuss because
It seems like you could, any of these stories, especially these stories from mythology, are easily. I mean, in any Western country, you see the similarities in the culture and stuff. Now, there's also opera in Asia as well, right? China opera is a huge thing.
Big growing scene of opera in China.
Yeah,
and there's quite a few. There's a couple of programs now that are trying to sort of bridge the gap and help American singers understand it and help Chinese singers.
Opera, not American opera, not European opera or Western opera done there, but their own opera.
Right. Both modern Chinese opera and also traditional Chinese opera.
That's interesting. So do you guys go touring at all? Do you mostly in New York, or do you do things outside?
We've really been in New York pretty much the entire time.
So you don't have an actual. Where do you actually practice? Like, where do people actually rehearse and prepare? And things
we are definitely an itinerant company. We have to rent space for rehearsals and rent space for performances. And
now people are fanatic about opera, but in all classical music and jazz as well, it's difficult to get financing and funding. And
always.
Usually you have another job or something going on.
You're saying a mouthful.
Right. So how do you guys go about finding the funding for what you do?
We've been very fortunate. The City of New York has been funding us since 2006 through the Department of Cultural Affairs, where they make money available. You have to apply and go through quite a process, but they've been kind and they've been very supportive and consistent. Just in the last couple of years as well, we've gotten grants from the New York State Council for the Arts, and a few foundations have begun to chip in. It takes a long time to sort of build up that acceleration curve of getting the visibility and getting the word out there, but it's a constant process of letting people know that we could really use more help and encouraging them to do that and getting them interested.
It really takes as much effort on the fundraising side of things as it does to do the musical and dramatic production.
It's not just the tickets aren't enough; the subscriptions and the tickets.
Tickets maybe 25% if you're lucky in opera.
Opera's probably the most expensive theatrical medium to produce because you have so many different elements and they all have to be done at a very high level for it to come together well. So that's always a challenge.
Tell me about the elements. like what we're going to see in August at the
Well,
at
we've
the
got about
Untamed Opera Festival?
we've got about 40 singers involved, all doing debut roles, all singing repertoire they've never sung before. There's an orchestra of about 20 for Vixen, and then a smaller ensemble for La Kalisto. So that's another, 30 players or so.
Oh, wow.
And our staff is probably, about 30, 35 people?
Designers and
How about
all told,
the
it's about
sets and
100
all
people.
that, constructing the sets.
absolutely.
What kind of sets are these shows going to have? The ones that you're talking about?
We tend to work in a sort of a black box format where the sets are not the prime the prime focus. We're trying to tell the story through the singers as much as possible.
Yeah.
But the scenic design and costume design have come together really well this year, and I think our designers are terrific. So
Chris has
All right,
coined a
great.
great term. We don't really like the term minimalist, so he calls our design elements essentialist,
Essentialist.
which I think
That's a
is
good one.
really
if it's
apt.
not
Good,
telling the
good,
story, we
good.
don't tend to have it up on the stage.
So tell folks again, it's going to be August, the Untamed Opera Festival. It's August 12th through 27th. The opening night's at 12th, right?
Right.
Yes.
At La
Kalisto.
Mama,
We open with
66
Kalisto.
East 4th Street. Evenings at 7:30, matinees at 2. How can people find out more information? Where should they go?
DellArteOpera.org.
Okay, that's
is the
spelled
easiest way.
DELLARTE,
Mhm.
opera, one word, .org.
That's
And
right.
all the information is there, everything you need to know.
Including some links for tickets.
How do you audition people? How do you find people?
We do annual auditions usually in January.
Mm-hmm.
We put the word out through several of the young artist magazines and websites. Because we're a development company for young singers,
Yeah.
we do have a little bit of a reputation as one of the young artist programs that people like to participate in.
Is there any one voice that's usually the star of the opera? Is it a soprano or a
Some
tenor?
it depends on the opera. We tend to try to pick pieces that are more ensemble pieces, and even if they are what might be called a vehicle piece, where one person is the star, we tend to try to spread out the focus as much as possible to give as many people.
I see. Right.
Focus on stage.
How does somebody decide? What's the process of becoming an opera singer? At what point in life do you really realize that it comes from an interest in classical music that develops into discovering a voice? How do you discover you can sing, in such a way?
That's a fascinating question. I'm a recovering opera singer myself. I came to it just through essentially loving music and loving to sing, and I started out in musical theater. I had learned a lot of song repertoire and done some language training, but I wasn't really necessarily drawn to opera until years of professional activity sort of led everyone in my sphere to the conclusion that opera was what my voice liked to do.
I see.
And once I discovered that's what my voice liked to do, it became fun to do
Right.
that. And I think that's probably a similar trajectory for a lot of people.
What does your voice like to do? What is it that makes it opera?
My voice is very strong. It's very big. And for me, the challenges of working in other languages and excavating sort of classical technique and stuff and getting my voice to create sounds that can be supple and last a long time and stuff it's a very satisfying sensation to sing like that and to work that way.
Is it necessary to understand the lyrics when you're singing a song?
Absolutely essential. It's one of the thrusts, a main focus that we start with is working from text. Without the libretto, you don't have a story to tell, and without a thorough understanding of the meaning of the words, you really don't have anything to say.
Do you have to know the language? Like, would I have to know Italian or just the lyrics that I'm singing?
I think if you don't speak Italian when you start to learn an Italian opera, you have more work to do. But then once you start to do that work, that actually becomes a portal to the language. And I think once you come through that kind of crucible, you will find that you know the language in spite of yourself.
Visit Rome and not have to have a translator.
You would certainly feel a lot more comfortable.
One of the drawbacks, I think, if going from opera into a language is that the vocabulary is a little limited. Because
it's hard to get to the dry cleaners and back.
And it's also quite archaic in some cases.
Yes.
you're using older forms of of verbs and.
Right.
And
what are with some? There's so many romantic. I mean, the operas always seem to be about something romantic. Somebody's in love with somebody, and it's unrequited.
like
and
all theater,
and it leads to a tragedy, and then maybe people learn something about it at the end.
to get back to what Karen said before, it's all about heightened emotions, and if you don't have a situation that has a heightened emotion, then there's not so much reason to sing.
Right. I can see that. Right. Why would you sing it out if it wasn't really exciting? Right.
Yeah.
You know, that's very interesting. And so, what countries we were talking about earlier? Countries that where opera is part of the blood of the country. You know, China, for example, one, not even a Western country, but and I'm sure other countries as well in the East. But in Europe, which countries is it? Italy? Is it France? Is it Germany? Which are known for the
Germany has the biggest opera scene in terms of the amount of performances, and.
There's hardly a town in Germany that doesn't have at least a small opera house.
Right.
And you were talking about languages before. In Germany, even still, some of the smaller houses perform most of the operas in German, regardless.
Even if they're Italian or French operas, or English. Or anything.
So there's a sort of a regionalism about that.
Right.
France has a lesser scene. Italy, of course, has always had a good scene, but there's as the government has funded the arts less and less in Italy, it's been difficult.
Right, same problems there. You could be 1,000 years old, but at the same time, nobody's funding it. I see. Interesting. Who is the greatest opera singer of all time?
That's a war.
Is it like
you want to start a fight?
Was it Domingo? Was it Caruso? Was it somebody else?
I think you could make an argument for somebody like a Caruso.
Absolutely. I mean, you could make an argument for any of probably 50 people.
Any story about New York City's history that you read about? I mean, everyone has the Caruso. The tree grows in Brooklyn. I mean, the Caruso's echoing through the windows.
Not so much Caruso, but next year we're planning on doing a festival based on the libretti of Da Ponte, Lorenzo da Ponte, who was Mozart's prime librettist for Così and Giovanni and for Nozze di Figaro, and when Da Ponte finished in Europe, he came to the United States and became a grocer. Had an unpaid position teaching Italian literature at Columbia, and led the first production of Don Giovanni in what was a precursor to the Met.
Wow, that's interesting. So, a librettist, what is that? A writer?
Librettist was the person who wrote the script for it.
Usually a poet.
Right, a poet, and it would be something dramatic. I mean, they would be writers. Were they often just wrote for opera, or were they write for
a lot
other
of times
things?
They were lawyers in the early days because they were the ones that had the linguistic abilities. And very few of them made a full living as a librettist, kind of like today.
Some were politicians.
I think we have another. Do we have another video? We want to play another clip while we have a chance. Let's run through that. And we're listening to our guests, Chris Feck. Oh, here we go. All right, there we go. All right, Chris Fecteau, and Karen Rich, the artistic director and general manager of the Del Arte Opera. And we were just watching a clip. What was the clip we just saw?
That's a clip from L'Incoronazione di Popea, the Coronation of Popea, a 2013 production. And it's actually a really great ad for our Kalisto, because so many of the people in that are returning with us. Jeffrey Mandelbaum, the countertenor who sang, will be singing the role of Endymione. Alison Cheeseman, who was the Nero, is returning with us to sing Diana. And our music director for Kalisto, Charlie Weaver, was playing in the orchestra, and in the tradition of us trying to bring people back and promote them to higher levels, Charlie will be our music director this year.
All right, wonderful. And so in the last minute, again, let's remind people when and where the event is going to be.
August 12th to 27th, summer shares at La Mama.
Located at 6060 4th Street in the East Village, Lower East Side, and you just take the F train wherever down there.
That's right.
Yep.
The F is the
About 3 blocks.
Exactly, right, good. And it's at 7:30, and matinees are at 2. The opening night is August 12th, all right, always the most exciting. And there's going to be 2 shows a day. And anything else we should know in the last 30 seconds? About opera or about the show?
I would like our audiences to know that even though we're working all in original languages, we do offer titles in English. So we're not aiming to keep you in the dark. We want you to.
So you can
we want you to know everything that's going on.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
That's a good idea. So it's not entirely in the other language. Although it's beautiful to hear something in another language, but it's really nice to be able to understand it as well.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Good. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
on
you,
Let
Paul.
Them Talk,
Thank
and have
you
a
for
great
your
show. All
Thank
right.
you.
Take care, and we'll see you next week. That's it.
Okay.
I'm
See,
not
nobody